ever feel like you're doing this teaching thing alone? You don't have to be. Shared teaching is all about sharing the workload through the power of collaboration and teamwork. Together, we'll walk through all the difficult parts of teaching and learn how to streamline our processes, fine-tune our time management, and develop a more manageable workload. If that sounds like a dream come true to you, then welcome to the Shared Teaching Podcast. Let's share in the teaching to make those dreams a reality. Now here's today's Shared Teaching. Hello and welcome to the Shared Teaching Podcast. I'm your host, Susan. Thank you so much for returning for another podcast episode. Today we're talking about one of my favorite things, which is teaching second grade. So welcome to episode 165, What to Know About Teaching Second Grade. So if you're new around here, my name is Susan, like I just said, and I have this little corner in the world of my podcast where I love to talk about all things first and second grade, in particular, all about writing. But today I want to talk about teaching second grade because I'm in a lot of Facebook groups, quietly stalking in the corner, and what I hear talked about all the time, especially right now in summer, is what do I do about this and how do I do this and what do I organize this and what should I know about this? And it's teachers that are kind of panicking but also want to get prepared for the next school year. So I love that that's you and you're here listening to this. So if you just found out you're teaching second grade, congratulations. I absolutely loved teaching my second graders the last several years. I have now transitioned to a GATE specialist, which is gifted and talented education, where I teach third through fifth grade, but I still have a very special place in my heart for second. There can be a lot of things to figure out for second grade, including classroom management strategies, birthday ideas, curriculum. So I'm going to cover all those things so you feel very prepared when the back to school season starts. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about second grade classroom management tips. Now, classroom management in second grade is all about consistency, connection, and clear expectations. Students thrive when they know the routine and they feel part of a caring community. So it's your job to start that off early in the school year and continue it all the way through. You're going to spend some time at the beginning of the year and keep it going, getting to know your students personally. You're going to play some fun games like Would You Rather? So that is just asking them, would you rather have pizza or macaroni? And just quick, easy questions like that. And there's tons of resources online. There's posts you can find on Pinterest that give you all kinds of would you rather questions. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but that is where you can find more. And then there's also the Find a Friend Who. So I don't know if you know these games, but it literally says find a friend who likes pizza. And you go around the classroom and you ask people, who likes pizza? And if they like the pizza, then they sign their name in the pizza square. So it's a really good way to get them out, get them talking to each other, and then filling in this cute little chart about finding a friend. And you can find a lot of those on TPT, back to school. They're free. There's some paid, I'm sure, but you can always find a good freebie with that information. Or make your own. It's quite easy. So this is really going to get your students just working together and making those connections with each other. Your classroom is going to become more like a family if you start off building this foundation. So it's very important that not only do you get to know your students, but they get to know each other. I've had years where I'm like, how do you not know that kid's name? And I don't want that to happen to you. So make sure that you are allowing students time, even just 5 minutes. It doesn't take long to get to know each other with these kind of games. One of my favorite games that I've talked about before on this podcast is to build empathy and connections in something called Good Things. I want to say I learned this at a training. Maybe it was Capturing Kids' Hearts. I'm not quite sure, but it was something like that, if not that training. And what you're going to do is you just take a few minutes each day to have just a couple of students share a good thing that happened to them recently. There's a whole little procedure that goes with it that I've written about before in a previous blog post called Classroom Management Techniques for Quick Wins. Of course, I'm going to link that in the show notes, so if you're driving or something, go visit that later and click on the link and it'll take you right there. And then it's the last of the quick wins, I believe, and you can learn all about good thing. It's really simple. The kids absolutely loved it. They were really sad when we skipped it, and it doesn't take much time at all. And it also kind of builds in a little bit of speaking and listening, which is a good standard and a good grade you can take. Hint, hint. So work smarter, not harder. Okay, so strong classroom management sets the tone for learning, and it makes your days run smoother. What to know about managing your second grade classroom is you want to start with clear rules and routines and practice them frequently. So take some time before school starts to just kind of brainstorm all the different routines that you want to have and what your expectations are for those. That way, when things come up in the classroom and you're in the middle of the first couple of weeks of school, you know exactly how to handle it, how to deal with it, how to teach it to the students. So make a little list for yourself. Next is using positive reinforcement to reward good behavior. Something like a classroom economy or reward coupons. It doesn't have to cost you anything except the time maybe to print these coupons and cut them out. However you want to do it. I really liked doing a whole class reward and then also individual awards. So I did both because I found that my second graders really needed that push to come together as a class and lift each other up, but then they also wanted something individual. So that's kind of where they're at in their development, I should say, is that they really like being an individual, but they also need help learning how to be part of a team. You're going to also keep students actively engaged with lessons that include movement, hands-on tasks, and partner work. They're still little kids and they really need short, concise lessons. So I know my math lesson could go on forever. We used Envisions. So between like the warm-ups and I can't even remember all the sections. I'm so sorry. It's summer brain. So you want to make sure that you are including that movement and that hands-on task, or even as simple as, okay, for these next 3 problems in your workbook, you're going to get up with your math neighbor and you're going to work on them together. Something as simple as that, where they're getting up out of their seats, they're moving, they're finding a partner, or even if it's just check your answer with a partner, something that's having them a little bit more engaged than just sitting for that solid, let's say 30 minutes of just going through the individual practice. So keep that in mind. You want to make sure you're breaking up those lessons. You also want to create visual schedules and cues to support transitions and minimize disruptions. The best thing I ever did with my class, and I've been doing this for a good 15 years now, is having a visual schedule posted on my whiteboard. I do have one for sale in my TPT store under $5, I believe. If you want to take a look, it will be in the show notes. No pressure though. But having some kind of visual schedule really helps because you don't get the, when is lunch? What comes next? What special do we have today? And you don't get those interruptions because you can just point to the schedule on the wall, and having it picture supported really helps those early learners, because in second grade, not all of your students will know how to read. So you really have to support that as well. And I also had a lot of students with autism in my class, and I had a deaf and hard of hearing learner. So having that visual schedule really worked fantastic for those students as well. So it's a really great way to support them, but also anybody in your classroom wants to know what time lunch is, right? When's lunch? When's recess? When's PE? All those good things. When do we go home? Especially when it's the first couple weeks. Okay, the next thing you need to know about second grade is you want to establish your strong routines early. So to go along with classroom management, routines are your best tool. In second grade, routines build independence and confidence, and it's going to help your day flow more smoothly. So just a couple quick important routines that you want to make sure you're teaching are morning procedures. Things like unpacking your backpack. Where does your backpack even go? Do you have to do some kind of lunch count for the day? And then are they going to do some kind of morning work while kids are straggling in? Do you even have that time where they come in before the bell rings, or do all your kids come in at the same time and then you start right then? Those are things you want to think through for the morning procedures. Also, you want to make sure lining up. Anytime you have to line up, bathroom breaks, any kind of transition, leaving the room, fire drills, practice that lining up and the expectations, voice level in the hallways, all those things go with lining up the bathroom transitions, right? You want to think through those things very clearly, very carefully, so you can be very, very explicit for your second graders. And you may have to repeat yourself 50 million times all about your expectations for the bathroom, including on the last day of the school year. Don't think that once they know it, you can just drop it. That is what's really important. You want to talk to them about how they talk to each other. So building up those expectations when they're working with their partners, how to talk to each other. And then also how to ask for help when they need help, or when to wait patiently if you're helping somebody else. This is a big thing in second grade. It was probably a big thing in kindergarten and a big thing in first grade. And you'll probably, if you're teaching fifth grade, you'll still be going over this, because I know I tell my GATE students as well, hey, was I just talking to somebody else? Okay, you need to wait your turn. So teaching them those cues of when you're busy, when is it okay to ask? Maybe you like to have that push light on the wall. Okay, if this is lit up, you're not bothering me, or you wear a special hat or something that cues them into, hey, don't disturb me, I'm working with others. That is what you're going to have to build into your routine. And then, of course, repetition is key. You want to practice and revisit your routines very often, especially if after a long break, such as Christmas time, and anytime you notice your class is not following those set expectations, you're going to have to revisit and revise. If something is no longer working after you revisit it, then you're going to have to revise it. If you want more information on classroom management, I do have an easy peasy classroom management course, which you can find on the Share Teaching blog, shareteaching.com. All right, next up is organizing supplies. You want to make sure you are very purposeful when you go through how you're going to organize things. Second graders tend to have a lot of supplies, and they can be quite messy and disorganized little kids. So a little structure goes a long way to keep it all under control. Try these for a simple system, and I love systems here on the Share Teaching podcast. So you're going to use color-coded bins or drawers for group materials, things like scissors, glue, markers, whatever you want to be community, if you do community at all. I always had like just a bin with different sections, and it had a label for what the group number was. So everything in that container had, like, let's say it said group 1. So group 1 was labeled on the crayons. Group 1 was labeled on the pencil box. Group 1 was labeled on the scissors. So group 1 knew all their things had to be returned in the group 1 tub or little table basket. And there was somebody that was in charge, a team captain for that group, that had to check the materials and make sure that they were all there and accounted for. That's how I got away with not losing a lot of things. You also might want to assign each student a number for all their notebooks and curriculum materials. Now, you do not call them by this number. You have their names. I know this is very controversial. I've seen some posts recently on social media about it, but teachers have been doing this forever, and it works really well, because if the kids don't mess up the supplies and the materials, then the next year they're already labeled, ready to go, and you don't have to relabel things. So I relabel my plastic prong folders. So usually kids have, let's say, I want to say 2, one for like word study, and then they have one for their writing folders, and it has a number, and it'll say like 1 writing folder, and then the other label will say like 1 word study. So they know they're number 1, and they get the number 1 things. And then they have a book bin that's a plastic book bin that I get from Walmart, and I think I just talked about these on a previous episode, and it will say 1 as well. and they know that their folder gets returned to that book bin when they're done with it. Which is my next point, which is to keep rarely used materials stored on a shelf students can access when needed. So things like their folders that they don't need all day long. If you allow them to keep them in their desk, then when they shove other things into their desk, it ends up kind of curled over, right? And like shoved way in the back, and then it will never be the same ever again. So if you want your supplies lasting and your plastic 3-prong folders that you spend a lot of money out of your own pocket to purchase, then you want to put routines and organization structures in place that's allowing the students to keep them nice and not break them. Because those plastic, I don't know what happened the other year, but they started ripping. I've never had that happen with my plastic folders, but I was allowing them to keep them in the desk, which is a big mistake because usually I allow them to give them to me and they're kept like in a spot on a shelf. So keep that in mind with things that they don't need all the time. Maybe you're only doing science a couple times a week. So does a science book really need to be in their desk? Or do they have little readers that they goes with the reading program that they don't need to keep in their desk? Because if they keep them in their desk, then the folders or the covers of the books get all bent out of shape. That stuff kind of drives me crazy. I like things to look nice and pretty, right? So think of a routine that you can create for them or a way to organize these things where they can still access them, but they're not shoved in a corner of the desk. All right, the next point is to have some kind of pencil routine. I like to just do a very simple dull versus sharp bin. And then you can also have somebody that's in charge of pencils, like a pencil monitor, that's going to help reduce constant interruptions. Do you want them sharpening pencils in the middle of lessons? If you are saying heck no, then you need to teach them that routine and that expectation when you're going over routines. So if you just have a jar of pencils that are dull versus sharp and you teach them put the dull ones in the dull ones if they need sharpened, and at the end of the day your pencil sharpener is sharpening them for you, then that's going to cut down on them using the pencil sharpener because it's not going to be all day. It's going to be only end of the day when everyone's packing up. Which brings me to having Are you looking for a really fun and enjoyable PD this summer? Well, come and join me and over 25 other amazing educators at the Educate and Rejuvenate Conference. It's happening July 15th and 16th, and you can get all the details plus join for only $5 at bit.ly/E_R_CONF. That's bit.ly/ERConf. Hope to see you there. Table groups or some kind of jobs makes your life so much easier. And I would highly recommend jobs that are group-based versus one job for every single individual student in your classroom. So I like to narrow mine down into just like 4 groups, and then each group is in charge of something very specific. So that will be in the blog post. So if you're interested in more details, go ahead and click on the link, the blue link in the blog post, and that will take you to a whole other blog post about classroom jobs. I'm not going to go through the whole thing here because I already have a whole blog post on it already. Next up is one of my favorite things. I still use it today with my GATE students, is to have tabbed composition notebooks. I find these are a game changer. So if you use tabs to separate the sections, then you can use one notebook for multiple things. I found it was not really necessary to have a separate notebook for word study, a separate one for phonics, a separate one for writing. I do think writing probably deserves its own notebook, but you might want to do different sections for each genre when you're studying. So if you're doing a whole notebook, then you're going to have a narrative tab, you're going to have an expository tab, or if you call it nonfiction, I don't know what you call your writing. I like to go with expository because that is what comes up in the standards, but to each their own. And then this helps keep everything in one place, and it teaches students to manage not only their own materials, but to go to the section that they need to go to very quickly and very easily. Okay, so that is why I love tabs, because they just flip to, oh, we're learning about this, we're going to flip to that section, and we're right there, good to go. We turn to the very next blank page. Perfect, right? That's how it works in my classroom. All right, next, and what I talked about last week, is to set up a thoughtful classroom library. You want it to be cozy and inviting, because library should be special and reading should be amazing for second graders. They are kind of at that in-between stage where some are just learning sounding things out. Yes, you might have some of those in second grade, and some are learning those easy reading, some are beginning easy chapter books. They're kind of this wide variety in second grade. So you want to make sure that you have things ready for each one of those learners. Now, my tips for organizing a classroom library is to choose whether you're going to sort books by genre, topic, or series. I love searching by genre, but also having some select bins for specific topics and things like favorites, like easy readers or a specific author that we're studying, and they will have a special bin for that person. You're also going to make bins that have nice labels and make it really easy for students to find books they love. Remember, you want to consider that not all your students might be readers, so how can you support them with pictures? You're going to include a mix of fiction and nonfiction in your classroom library. Animals, science topics, biographies, they're all big hits with second graders, especially those big, beautiful photographs in a lot of those nonfiction texts. You're going to keep it very accessible. You're going to use lower shelves, so they don't have to reach so high to try to get books. Maybe a beanbag or those scoop chairs. I had a couple of those scoop chairs and they really loved those. They also loved being allowed to take the book and read anywhere they wanted in the room. Maybe grabbed a pillow, found a reading spot, and just create that space and that energy where you're showing them how much you enjoy having them spend time reading. And then, of course, you want to teach those library procedures. How are they checking out and returning their books? How are they taking care of the books? Make sure you go through all of those with your students. I do have 3 podcasts/blog posts all about how I organize my classroom library and some thoughts for organizing libraries that I will link in the show notes. So if you want more information on those topics, go for it and read those posts. Next up is celebrating student birthdays with a goodie bag. Now, this might be maybe not controversial, but not every teacher wants to spend a lot of money out of pocket, and you don't really have to. I love to make the little goodie bags for them, so I just go to the Dollar Tree and I buy packs of the little paper goodie bags, enough for the whole class, and then inside each one is a free homework pass that I just make on my computer, and it literally just says like, happy birthday, free homework or something. Turn this in for a free homework. I'm not sure what the wording is. I'm going to find it on my computer and I'm going to put a picture of it in the blog post. I put a pencil in there because they can never have too many pencils because they lose them like they're going out of style. And then I do a customized crayon, which is made from recycled crayon parts. So at the end of every year, I actually keep my crayons and I remove the wrappers from them. You break them up and you put them into a silicone tray. And I live in the desert, so I just stick that outside and then the crayons melt and they form whatever shape of the mold that you put it in. And then you have a free little fun crayon that writes in different colors because I mix up the colors. And hopefully that will be a picture on the blog post as well. And then I also found these really cool self-inflating balloons. They're just really tiny little things. And they came from the Dollar Tree as well. And so all of those go in their little goodie bag. And then I just tie it with a fun little curly ribbon. And then on the day of their birthday, I just put it on their desk for them to have. So just something very, very simple. I am not a huge fan of myself having birthday crowns and badges and all that, or decorating their chair. But if that's you, then go for it. You do not have to go all out like that. It's just the simple touch that makes a big impact. And I do want to make sure to note here that you want to check with parents that their child actually celebrates their birthday, and it's okay if you do something for them that's going to make their day special. I had a student one year that transitioned living with his family to his grandma, and once he moved in with his grandma, he was no longer allowed to celebrate holidays and birthdays because of grandma's religion. And so that was a big transition for him, but it was also important that I supported grandma in that transition. So just reach out to the parents, make sure that they celebrate birthdays, and that it's okay that you share in that with their child. All right, last but not least, let's talk about teaching the big three: reading, writing, and math. Second grade is a very crucial year for building foundational skills in reading, writing, and math. You'll see your students move from sounding out words to reading with fluency, from writing simple sentences to actual full paragraphs, and counting by ones to understanding things like place value and regrouping. It is mind-blowing the growth that these students will go through in just one school year. So here's where we want to focus in on each subject. So reading, you're going to teach comprehension strategies like making connections and asking questions. You want to focus on decoding multisyllabic words and building fluency. You're going to use small groups and guided reading to target the student needs. Writing, my favorite. You want to introduce the writing process, which is plan, draft, revise, edit, and publish. You're going to start with personal narratives and then move into opinion and informative writing. And then I like to wrap up the year with fictional narratives. So a little bit of fiction writing. You're going to provide sentence stems and graphic organizers to support structure, and you're going to focus on one skill for each lesson. If writing is hard for you, I have a million blog posts, not really, but it feels like it, all about the subject of writing because it is my absolute favorite thing to talk about day in and day out. So make sure you just peruse through the podcast links and you can find a whole bunch of goodies on that. I also have a special writing process mini-series that I did at the end of spring break-ish. I did a whole writing process mini-series, so that is always a good one to dive into if you want a little bit of information about each one of those parts of the writing process. Last but not least, math. We're going to emphasize place value, addition and subtraction within 1,000, and problem solving. We're going to use manipulatives and visual models to build that understanding. The second graders really need that hands-on and that visual. We're going to encourage a math talk to develop their reasoning and vocabulary. You want to make sure you're also communicating all of these things with parents. So I have a kind of like what to expect in second grade guide. I change the name of it all the time because I just don't know what to call it, but it outlines the key academic skills that they need in reading, writing, math. And it also talks about classroom routines, expectations, so that it's really clear communication and it builds trust and helps your parents feel like they're partners in the learning process. So I love to give it out at back to school conferences. And you could do it right at the back to school, but then I feel like it gets kind of shuffled in with all the other paperwork that parents are expected to fill out and return. So I like to save it for like the October parent conferences. So if you're still wondering what to know about teaching second grade after this nice long episode, then you are going to want to think about building strong systems early, staying organized, and making time for joy. You should just enjoy teaching one of the best grades there is out there, which of course is second grade. So thank you so much for joining me this week on the Shared Teaching Podcast, and I hope to see you next week. Bye for now. If you've loved this show, then join me in sharing the teaching,
hitting that subscribe button,
and leaving us a review on
iTunes,
so we can be found by more teachers like you who are ready to start sharing the workload. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Find new episodes each week on sharedteaching.com. Thanks for listening to the Share Teaching Podcast.